Welcome to the London Free Press Podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Gilbert. As is well known, of course, the price of homes has been going up and up over the last several years, making it almost impossible for young people to enter the home buying market. So today I'm talking with London Free Press reporter Jonathan Juha about a new Canadian study which looked at exactly what caused this problem, what could be done to make it more affordable, and if that's even feasible. Hi, Jonathan. How are you?
Not too bad on yourself.
Good. So let's just talk about the study. This was done at a university in BC. Is that right? Who did the study?
So this study was conducted by Professor Paul Kirchhoff. He's a policy professor at UBC. And it's a study looking at the different sort of like markets across the country and sort of like trying to compare what it takes or what would take to get into the housing market now to compare to what it did a few decades ago. Sort of like compare whether the conditions that young buyers are facing now to what young buyers in the 1980s, let's say, were facing, and to see whether there's still sort of like the same purchasing power, the same equality of opportunity as it was back then as it is now. And basically the answer is no. Prices have grown significantly faster than the earning power of Canadians, especially for these demographic young people between the ages of 25 to 34, which is when the majority of people are sort of like trying to enter into the market. And it included some staggering figures. Like, for example, back in the 80s, it would take a person on their earnings sort of like about an average of 4 years to be able to save for that 20% down payment, even though interest rates were much higher back then. But just getting that down payment, it only took about 4 years on average. That number now has gone up to 19 years. So definitely just even getting your foot on the door, it's a lot harder. The other aspect on the other side of the coin would be the average earning for this age group here in London would need to be like around 100,000 to perhaps be able to match what the prices have grown over the past few years. And even the decline that we have seen, starting in the spring of 2022 has not been enough to sort of like bring that equality back into balance.
Right. Yeah, we have seen prices go down. Interest rates are going up. Anybody kind of my age, I had parents who bought a home in the 80s, 70s, 80s, and everybody, boomers will talk about, the interest rates in the 80s were double digits, 18%. It was so expensive. But that compared to now is nothing, right? I mean, it's really not comparable.
So the study also looks at a little bit at that. And in my conversation with Professor Kirchhoff, he does mention, obviously, it was hard back then, obviously, having such high interest rates. It's not like getting into the market was just, a given, right? But he doing the math, he said, even at those high interest rates, the annual mortgage payment a person was making was about $21,000 a year. You go back to, let's say, 2021, when prices were increasing, but the interest rates were historic lows, like 0.25% was what the Bank of Canada had it at one point, right? But even having that very small interest rate or record low interest rates compared to the price of the house still makes that annual mortgage payment, it's about $41,000 a year. So yeah, you had back in the day significantly higher interest rates, but on a significantly cheaper property. So there's still some imbalance even in that point. And the studies continues to suggest that it's even harder for younger generations now to get into the market than it was for those in the 80s.
Young people now, I mean, they're still trying to buy a home because that's the goal of a lot of people, is to have their own property. But they're not able to enter the market, but it's not for their lack of trying, right? Like they're working, they're saving, they're doing everything they can to try to enter the housing market, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, the professor also makes that point that it's not like a lack of trying or lack of work ethic or lack of education, because there are many professionals who simply, sometimes entering the housing market, it's all about timing, right? And could not enter fast enough. And then even though they make a good earning or have a decent career, they're still finding it hard to get into the market. And that's where it says there has been a little bit of a disconnect between the price growth for homes and the earning ability of Canadians over the past several years. Study also mentions how, even that very cheap interest rate was one of the reasons why prices are like skyrocketed over the past 2 years, combined with everything that happened during the pandemic. It was also like they were growing up, prices were growing at a pace that were not really connected to other, economic fundamentals, I guess, right? So that also makes the issue even harder for younger families now. And talking about, yeah, I was just gonna say also, you're talking about parents. That's why you also hear these stories of parents now also having a bigger role in helping out their children get into the market. Maybe they set the property with some of the equity, they help pay for the down payment. So you are seeing sort of like those extra helps for young people entering the market, but obviously not everyone has that possibility as well.
Sure. Yeah. I was going to ask you, how did we get here and why? Because you did touch on that a little bit. But now you've brought up more questions for me. But first of all, let's expand a little bit on how we got to this place where housing prices are so incredibly high. And now we've had to raise interest rates because of inflation and the housing market and prices in general, right? Like we're trying to balance it out. But how did we get into this situation in the first place?
So if you look at the housing market for London specifically, maybe in the 1990s or the 2000s, for the most part, it was a very stable market in the sense that you saw sort of like gains on the properties to appreciate it, but they did it like a very slow pace, maybe 1-2% a year. So very slowly. It's around 2015 when we start to see sort of like prices gain a lot faster than that. And part of the situation that was happening was many baby boomers who were living in the Toronto area. Obviously home prices are higher there. They were selling their properties as they hit retirement age, took that equity, and then were able to come into the market and get, a bigger bang for the buck, right? With the same money, they could, even for less money, they could get more of a house here, bigger houses, more luxury finishes and things like that. So we started to see sort of like that deep pocket of GTA buyers sort of like start coming into the market. And that's when we start to see some of the faster gains for homes, right? All of that accelerated with the pandemic. You have now, on the one hand, you have, the stay-at-home orders. So people definitely started to feel, okay, if I need to be working at home and I need to have my kids here, the space that I have is not enough. I need something bigger. And then at the same time, you have the work from home phenomenon where people, okay, like I don't need to be close to my downtown office in Toronto anymore. I can work from anywhere because I'm doing everything remotely. So that opened the possibilities for people to start to look farther afield. And that's what we have started to see. So that accelerated even more the number of buyers coming from other regions to more affordable places like London, Woodstock. All of Southwestern Ontario has sort of like see that wave of buyers arrive. And that accelerated the prices. And again, we got to a point where interest rates were very low, home prices were going up. Some people were like, okay, if I don't get into the market right now, maybe I won't be able to because the prices are just going to run away from me. So it created sort of like a perfect storm of different factors for people trying to enter into the market. And we just saw so much demand for the supply that we had here. And even though construction has kept up, it was just not enough to absorb all of it. So we saw prices going up. Now, when we started to see inflation again, the Bank of Canada back in the spring of last year started increasing interest rates. And that has definitely cooled down the market as monthly payments for mortgages, even though the average price of a home continues to go down, the increase in interest rates still continues that to mean that you are actually better off buying even at a higher price, but a cheaper interest rate for your monthly payments.
Sure. So talk about how, and you did touch on this already, how are young people affording to buy homes? Because some are getting into the market and they're buying homes. Because I think some people think, oh, it's never going to come down. It's never going to be that affordable again. I might as well do it now. They're having help from their parents, as you mentioned, but how else are they doing? Are they living with other families? Are they moving away from London? Like, are all these, people from the GTA coming to London and then pushing Londoners to other centers?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because in the last update from Statistics Canada about the population trends here in the London, and in its latest update, we did see for the first time in a few years, we lost about 1,000 people in the city moving to other provinces. So from that period between 2015 to 2021, we were sort of like the fastest growing community in Ontario, we were not only gaining people from the GTA and other parts of Ontario, we were also gaining people from other provinces coming here. On top of that, the international migration. But now we're seeing a little bit of a reversal of that trend. We're seeing people leaving to other provinces, Atlantic Canada. It's one that it's been lately in the news, as you know. Obviously, the price of homes it's cheaper, so a lot of people are starting to also look further afield as to where they can afford when they can get that home that they want.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's talk about some of the suggestions from the study that were made to make things more affordable. Certainly, the study says housing prices have to come down, and or the earnings of the average earnings have to go up. So just expand on that, and then add, how feasible is that? Is that like a likely scenario?
So these are not presented as solution per se as to the problem. It's more like a look at what the conditions would need to be for the market to be more accessible and affordable. So the study suggests that one aspect of the equation that would have to change would be sort of like for home prices to drop by about 350,000 from their 2021 peak. That would put homes like around the $325,000 to $350,000 mark, right? Or if the home prices do not continue to drop or don't drop to that level, another solution potentially could be that obviously the earning power would increase. So for people for this generation, 25 to 34, who are usually on average making around $50,000 a year, they need to be making like about 100, right? So it's not so much a solution. It's saying like to bring back that equilibrium and that affordability to the market. How would the market need to look like right now? Obviously, those are not very feasible solutions that would happen from one day to another. But the point is to say that, something definitely does need to change. If it is construction of more homes, we also need to be talking about the type of homes that we're building, not just the luxury property that is going to cost $900, $1 million to the buyer, because that's not going to do much to help young families trying to enter the market. So you also need to be building homes that are at a more affordable price points, or like the entry home for families and things like that. Or perhaps maybe it is that the market continues to stay a little bit more stable and we don't see the gains that we're seeing, allowing earnings to catch up a little bit. And that's sort of like part of the solution, what a little bit of the idea behind the provincial government's plan to build the 1.5 million homes over the next 10 years is to increase the supply to a point where prices do not go as fast, allowing people to sort of like catch up to the market, right? We'll still, the jury is out as to see whether that will be enough to sort of like bring that affordability and make it really something that is not out of reach for many, but it's just a wait and see at this point to see if the policies that are not being put in place to try to accelerate that construction of homes pay off.
It's certainly a long-term plan. Did the study mention at all, or do you know, in talking with experts, any long-term effects of keeping young people out of the housing market? Like if young people can't get into the housing market, if it takes them 19 years to save, they could be 40 before they buy their first home. Are there long-term effects for keeping them that result in keeping them out of the market?
The study itself, I don't recall going into sort of like long-term effects, but you can see a real-time effect on rents, actually. And you see it in London. We have seen in London how rents have risen dramatically as well over the past few years. They have doubled in the past 6 years. And, a two-bedroom apartment now, it's average, the asking price is about $2,000. But part of the equation as well is that, like, if you cannot enter the housing market as a renter, you're staying renting longer. So that unit is not becoming available for the next person who needs it, right? So we're keeping the supply of units very tight in the city, and the supply. I'm trying to remember the vacancy rate. The vacancy rate in the city has been hovering between 2.5%, 3% over the past few years. So you're seeing that's an effect as well. Like if people were more easily able to enter into the housing market, you're at least releasing some of that pressure and more units are becoming available. There's less competition perhaps, and that can help control a little bit of prices. But in the short term, keeping people from entering the market is one of the elements that is also impacting rentals.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Jonathan. It doesn't seem like there's an immediate solution, but this is kind of a long-term thing that, of course, many officials have been thinking of and working on. We will keep an eye on your stories and certainly follow your reporting at lfpress.com. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.